Hey there viewers, Eric O here at Self Made Auto. Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, welcome to our channel. Got a new project for today. Got a 2007 Hyundai Sonata behind us. It's got a 6-cylinder and it originally came in as a no start. Well, you guessed it, it runs now. So I'll give you a little bit of history on it. It's a guy here in town, just a mile or so from the shop, and he works about a half mile away, and he started it up. Drove it to work, everything was fine, and everything has been fine with the car. No engine light or any previous symptoms. He went to leave from work that night and the car wouldn't start. Well, at least he told me it wouldn't start. He said it kind of started, stumbled a little bit, stalled, and then he just proceeded to crank it until the battery went dead. So, long story short, we went over, dragged it over here, pushed it inside. That was on a Thursday. Tried to start it that, immediately after we got it here, threw the battery charger on it. Figured probably the fuel pump or something went bad, so I wanted to try to diagnose it real quick to get some parts so I could fix it on Friday morning or Friday afternoon sometime. So pushed it in, put charger on it. I gave it just a little shot of ether to see if it would, start and stall and, possibly verify that it wasn't getting fuel. But I did that, and to my surprise, nothing happened. It didn't do anything. So I went and checked it for spark, checked it for injector pulse, in which case it had both. At the time, the car was cranking kind of slow, so, because I was being pretty impatient, didn't let the battery charge fully. So anyhow, I said, the heck with it. I'll leave it sit till morning, and I'll check it out then. It was super, super cold outside, so I just left it sit in the building overnight, came back in the next morning, and the car started. And it ran really rough and was spitting and coughing and, carrying on. So I let it run. Pulled it outside, let it sit there and idle for a while, just kind of warm up while I cleaned up the mess on the floor and everything from where it dripped off overnight. And I walked back out to get in it, and I see it was misfiring. It was sitting there running on what seemed to be about 5 cylinders. Just boom, 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 boom. Light was flashing and all that business. So I grabbed the code reader, and that sure enough had a P0300 in it. That was the only code. So I cleared the codes. And the skip cleared up after clearing your code. So I don't know if when it was misfiring, if these will shut down an injector, what the strategy is behind it. I didn't really care at the time. So I took it for a drive around the block. Everything seems to work fine. Car's got good power, all that stuff. The engine light did not come back on. It didn't start misfiring again. So I thought that was kind of odd, a little bit concerned as to why it didn't, start for the fella the first time. So let's see, what did I do after that? So I took it and let it sit outside because I wanted it to get cold again to see if this, was a cold related problem or, what the story was. So I parked it right out here in front of the bay, let it sit out, let it get cold. It got down to about 5 or 6 below zero, and I went out and started it, and it fired right up. Everything seemed to work fine. So I was like, well, I hate giving them back without, knowing what the heck was going on. So I just kind of started going through some scan data to see if everything looked good on the data, see if the intake air and coolant temp and all that stuff was working as intended. And everything looked good, but I did notice that the O2 sensor on bank 1, so it's going to be the rear half of the engine, or the engine closest to the firewall, was hovering really low, and the fuel trim was pretty much just pegged right out. It was sitting at like, I don't even remember, plus 25 or 30 or something. It was really trying to add fuel to that rear bank. So it was showing me that, it was running super lean. Both O2 sensors on the back, the upstream and the downstream, were both reading lean. Plus the fuel trim was saying, hey, we need more fuel. So that indicates to me that it really is indeed running lean on the back bank. The front bank of the engine, bank 2, seemed to be working perfect. Fuel trim's right around zero, O2 sensors are working. So I was like, that's kind of bizarre why it doesn't throw a code, or why it seems to run fine. And then about no sooner I thought that, the money light pops on with a P0171. So the computer recognizes it's running lean. It is running lean. I contacted the customer, and he didn't say he'd been having any problems prior to this with an engine light coming on or anything of that nature. So I say, being that the car runs now, let's have a look at the lean condition and see if we can figure out what that is, and maybe that was part of the cause of the no start. So who knows? We gotta fix what we know is broke. So let's see what we got. Now that you've got a little bit of the brief history on it, I'll tell you where I'm at as far as what I've done, which really isn't a whole lot other than what I've told you. When I had it hooked to the code reader and I was watching the data stream, you know, I could see that bank was running lean. I'm like, it's kind of odd to see 3 cylinders on a V6 run lean. Typically, if there's a vacuum leak, you know, something of that nature, it usually affects the whole engine, generally. Now, granted, it can be leaking, you know, on the intake side of, you know, the intake runners for just that engine. You don't see it a whole lot, but it's possible. So just for the heck of it, had the code reader hooked up, watching data, grabbed a can of brake clean, just went around the intake, didn't see any change whatsoever by any means. And I don't hear any vacuum leaks when it's running, at least anything substantial. The engine runs pretty quiet. Honestly, it runs pretty good. I mean, you start it up and drive down the road, I mean, you give it the beans. I mean, this thing, you know, it runs and it doesn't seem to lack for any kind of power or anything. So I've checked fuel pressure. I've got a fuel pressure gauge in the back seat right now hooked to the fuel pump because that was the easiest place to go. Seems to have good fuel pressure, has good fuel volume. And I've checked, I pulled a fuel sample out of it and checked the alcohol content because he said when it didn't start, it was immediately after, you know, he got gas that day, so it's got a full tank of gas. And then of course he dumped a bunch of concoctions in the gas tank. I don't know, because that's what we do when our cars don't start. At least in this area, it seems to be. You know, our engine light comes on, we immediately fill up the transmission with like 4 quarts of training fluid and dump a quart of oil and some dry gas. But anyhow, that's a different story. So I've checked fuel pressure. I've, you know, given it a quick spray on the intake to see if the fuel trim changed. It didn't. So I'm at the point where I've got to do some real diagnosing now and figure out what's going on. The engine's cold right now. It's just been sitting inside here. It's only, I don't know, 60 inside. Engine, you know, sat overnight. I turned the heat down, so the engine's probably around 40 degrees. I want to take the smoke machine while the engine's still cold, and I'm going to, you know, plumb it into the intake, verify there's absolutely no vacuum leaks. And if that's the case, I'm going to take and start it up. We're going to look at some data. I'm going to show you what's going on, and then we're going to go from there and see perhaps, you know, why it's running lean on one bank. You know, can a plugged injector or a semi-plugged injector, you know, give us this lean reading, and we'll verify that the O2 sensors respond. You know, make sure that they're working, and let's kind of go from there and see what we come up with. I've never ran across one of these before, so maybe you have, and you're home yelling at your screen like, I know what it is. Anyhow, we'll see if we can figure it out. I'm gonna plug off the intake here with just a plastic cap. And hook up the smoke machine, see if we can find a vacuum line to tie into here. Oh gosh, what do we got? That hooks the intake. We got one right here. Alright, got a vacuum line right here. They're hooked up to the intake here. Verify we don't have any leaks, or maybe verify that we do have a leak. I don't see anything leaking. Like I said, I did spray it a little bit with some brake parts cleaner when it was running, and didn't see any change in the fuel trim. So, I mean, looking at the flow gauge here on the smoke machine, that's right down to just about nothing. So that's actually sealed up pretty tight. I guess we'll just say that it doesn't have any vacuum leaks. Kind of verified that. And like I said, I did spray it with some brake parts cleaner, so I was pretty sure that we didn't have any. But just kind of wanted to double check it when it was cold here with the smoke machine, just to be 100% certain. So now that we know we've got good fuel pressure, we got good fuel volume, we've got no vacuum leaks, I'm going to take and fire it up here, get the Varus plugged in here, and show you guys what's going on with the fuel trim, so you know what I'm looking at. And then we'll make a decision from there what we think the next best step would be. Got the Varus hooked up. That's the code we have. So we're going to go back in here. We're going to look at some data. I'm going to show you guys what I'm seeing, and that way we're all on the same page here. I think get some custom data pulled up here. See what all we want. So have a look at our O2 sensors and our short-term fuel trim. I don't really think anything else is going to be relevant at this point, because the majority of everything else, input-wise, would affect both cylinders, I would assume. Alright, let me go ahead and start the car up. Fired the car up. So here is bank 2 sensor 1. So this is the side of the engine that's actually running good. Okay, and here's bank 1 sensor 1, and you can see this O2 sensor is sitting right here at about 0 volts. Let it run here momentarily and get a little bit warmed up. We can also see the short-term fuel trim down here at the bottom for bank 1 is running in the high numbers. You know, it's trying to add fuel. Well, the short-term fuel trim for bank 2 is, you know, slightly negative. Let this warm up a little bit, get these rear O2 sensors working. That's one thing I do like to use for a clue, I guess, so to speak. If the, you know, if one oxygen sensor is reading lean, theoretically, its companion, or the downstream O2 sensor, the one on the catalytic converter, should also, you know, indicate, hey, you know, yeah, this bank of the engine's running lean. So this is a lot on Chryslers. You know, driving down the road, they skip and buck and cough and snort, and you know, the front O2 sensor goes, you know, it's usually stuck rich, and you'll see the rear O2 sensor will be just pegged right out at 0. So we can see these are starting to come online. So let's see what's going on here. So this is bank 1 sensor 2, and we can see that is also you know, corresponding with what the upstream is saying. Get this, get these both filled up here. Oops. So this is bank 2. Here's bank 1. No, I may be wrong here. So let me go ahead and close this out because we don't care about bank 2 anymore. So here's both O2 sensors on bank 1. Let me go ahead and give this car some throttle here. Let's see what we got now. So our short-term fuel trim on bank 1 is still right here at adding fuel like crazy, but look at this rear O2 sensor. This thing's got a pretty puffed up there. Let's compare it to the bank we know that's running good. So bank 2, I'll be darned. Starting to look like we have a possibly just a bad O2 sensor here, judging by the looks of it. Bank 1 sensor 2, bank 1 sensor 1. The upstream sensor is indicating that the engine is running lean. We can see that here. The fuel trim is trying, you know, the computer's trying to compensate for it. But our rear O2 sensor is indicating that, hey, this is running a little bit rich. What I would say, based on what we're seeing here, like I say, this rear O2 is indicating, yeah, it's running rich. Front one's saying it's running lean. My experience says that that kind of indicates to me that we might have a non-responsive O2 sensor there. Let's see if we can get this O2 sensor to respond rich. We'll introduce a little bit of brake clean or propane or something there in the system and see if it responds to it. Before we do that, I'll just give you one more snapshot here at an idle. You can see we're idling about 850. And we can see it's kind of indicating the same thing. So here's our bank 2 upstream and downstream. We can see that's kind of what we would expect for a normal reading. But definitely not here. That's interesting. I thought I looked at this, I thought I looked at this the other day when it was in, and it was indicating lean upstream and downstream. So that's why I decided to record this. Anyhow, that's why we always come back and double check. So here's my thought. Well, it's still idling. Well, look, now you can see I've had it sitting here idling while I was doing, I had to go and talk to a customer. And you can see that O2 sensor is actually starting to work in a sense. Why don't we see if it has the ability to respond to a lean condition, because that's the easiest condition to create. So let me go yank a vacuum hose off. Yeah, we can see it goes lean. Let me plug that back in. Foolish thing's gonna start working now, I bet. That's the way it works. Let's see what happens here. I'll be darned. I'm gonna take and shut the car off and restart it and see if that maybe makes it knock out again. Okay, so I shut it off and let it sit for just a couple minutes, and then took and restarted it. Things kind of warm up here. You can see immediately the bank 2 is actually starting to work. I'd like to kind of recreate the problem here to see if we can, 100% verify this. See what the fuel trim's doing there. Well, the fuel trim's starting to cut back now. See if this O2 sensor responds to it or not. So we can see here on bank 1, this fuel trim down here is really chopping way back. See if this O2 sensor starts working. Yeah, darn it. Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So it appears this O2 sensor is actually starting to work again. I want to 100% verify this. I'm going to let the car sit. We could just wing an O2 sensor in it on a big fat guess based on what we saw before, but we didn't have the, well, I guess I got distracted there and had to, like I said, I had to go talk to some customers. So shouldn't have left the car idling, but I did, and it appears that this O2 sensor started working, so to speak. So I'm going to leave it sit because I want to catch it in the act again. I want to try to force it rich or force it lean, one way or the other, to see if we can't verify that it is just a bad O2. So anyhow, be back in just a second. Here we go again. Let it sit for a while. I think it's pretty definitive, really. We see that even just sitting for a short period. It's been, I don't know, I had to go do some stuff, been probably, I don't know, 20 minutes. We can see immediately that the bank 2 sensor 1, O2 sensor works right out of the gate. And we see that, this bank 1 here is really, really slow to respond. Again, the fuel trim is pegged out there. Fuel trim for the bank 2 is right around 0, which is what we'd expect. I'm gonna let this run for a little bit here and warm up and see if this starts working, and then hopefully we can get a test to see how it responds to a to a vacuum leak or to a force rich condition there. Starting to come up. Hopefully these videos aren't too boring where we're just staring at some data, but we've got to get some collection points here somewhere. So rear O2 sensors aren't online yet. Well, we can see it just slowly climbing. See the fuel trim here cutting it back, trying to cut it back substantially now. I'd bet the farm on it. We just got a bad O2 sensor here. This thing is really slow at responding, and then, there it goes. It starts working. So, gosh, I don't know. Probably the best thing to do at this point is just get an O2 sensor for it. This thing seems to be really slow to respond. Of course, we could let it sit for a while and test it out that way. But I think we've seen the results. We can spend a lot of time goofing around with this thing, but being that this O2 sensor here, you know, immediately starts responding. This one here is really behind the ball. You know, the computer seems to be trying to compensate for it with the fuel trim down here. You know, I'm just gonna call it, say it's a bad O2 sensor. That's where our code's coming from. So see if we can get one ordered up. I guess we can just leave it at that for the time being. I was really hoping that we were gonna find, you know, like a semi-plugged injector or some crap in the fuel rail there. I didn't. I was pretty certain. I checked this, you know, the other day when I had it over here, and I was looking at the scan data. I'm almost positive that I saw that the front O2 and the rear O2 were both reading lean, you know, indicating that it was lean. But we can see here now today when I'm checking this thing out that the rear O2 sensor is indicating that it was running rich, even when the front O2 sensor was saying lean. So that's a pretty good indicator. That front O2 sensor is definitely lying to us. You know, you got to take the facts. I mean, that's what we see. That's what the data says. So. You know, we could spend, you know, I could let it sit again overnight, retest it again. You know, I was all ready to. I had the propane. It was going to be sweet, but this is what it is. I'm going to order an O2 sensor. I just looked. Nobody has one. I can't have one till tomorrow afternoon. So Joey's living in a small town with no cities close by. We always got to wait for our parts. You know, so, you know, before I put that O2 sensor in, I'm probably not going to warm it up and, you know, check it again. Because then it's going to be a bear to work on when it's hot. So I don't know, experience tells me the O2 sensor's crap. Gonna go with that. If I'm wrong, well, just have to eat it. So I guess until we get the O2 sensor in, that's what we're gonna call it. And just kind of wrap this video up for right now. I will come back with a follow-up video as soon as we get that and get it put in there, and just kind of take your thoughts in the meantime as what do you think. And you know, have you seen it before? I have seen it on, you know, Hyundais particularly, seen it on Chrysler, seen it on GMs, they all kind of act the same. So anyhow, leave it at that, and we'll come back with a follow-up video here, probably tomorrow sometime, and get it posted up on there. So anyhow, thanks for watching.